Again, good day, and we're here on the eve of what would be a fantastic turnaround in the case. But I want you to discuss, first of all, there's been some controversy in this case regarding whether or not Tawana Brawley should have came here and testified. Did she disappoint you? What did you expect out of this? And really, what's the bottom line?
Well, no, she did not disappoint me, and she could not have disappointed anyone else. She was never invited to appear. It was unfortunate the media began to publicize her appearance before she had ever been contacted. And then when the judge gave a deadline, everybody created a media hype, and people were waiting for Tawana Brawley to come when in fact she had never been informed. This case goes back to November 18, 1997, when we started jury selection. 2 weeks later, we made our opening statements, and I made it very clear then that this case was not about Tawana Brawley, that this is a defamation action, and people have to understand that. A defamation action is about statements that were made by Mason and Sharpton. It is not a rape prosecution. Therefore, no one anticipates Tawana Brawley coming forward and saying Steve Pagonis did it, because that's not what the allegations are. Many of these allegations really have nothing to do with Stephen Pagonis. Some of the statements involve a cover-up of William Grady, protecting Stephen Pagonis from prosecution in the first place. There were other statements that related to Harry Criss and whether he was murdered or whether he committed suicide. Harry Criss being the police officer up here in Fishkill, New York, who was found dead within 72 hours or so after Tawana Brawley was found, and to whom later Tawana Brawley fingered as one of the persons involved. So when you look at the statements that form the basis for the defamation action, then there was no real reason to call Tawana Brawley to the witness stand, because she would have nothing to offer on that. Why it took off the way it did is because people did not have sufficient information to make their own independent, credible determinations as to whether she should have been here or not. And part of that problem is on the media itself, because it has never covered this case accurately and fairly. It has always been one-sided. If you pick up the Daily News, the New York Post, the New York Times, it is slanted in a direction to aid Pagonis. There were days when we slam dunked the plaintiff's case up here, and that was never in the media at all. So people either heard evidence that they thought was in support of Pagonis, or they just heard some sensational story that had nothing to do with the trial itself. And so therefore people, rushed to judgment, not knowing the true facts here, not recognizing that Tawana Brawley had never been given notice. Even during the course of the trial, even Mr. Mason was quoted many times as saying that he would not bring Tawana Brawley to court to be raped again by plaintiff and his counsel. So Tawana could never had any reason to expect anybody was going to call her. And at the time when people were in court asking the judge, could she appear, the judge's first reaction was, no, she couldn't. Mm-hmm. And so for a week or more, the judge had ruled that Tawana Brawley could not appear in court. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Mason and his lawyer renewed that application on a Tuesday, which was July 21st, I believe, and the judge gave them less than 48 hours to produce Tawana. Well, at that particular time, the media had already circled Tawana's house. She had vanished from her home, and within less than 48 hours, Tawana Brawley couldn't be reached. The last person on earth who knew that she was supposed to be in Poughkeepsie was Tawana Brawley, if you reasonably believe that there was some expectation on her part to have been in Poughkeepsie, New York. So it is very unfortunate that some people now beginning to trash Tawana Brawley when there was really no legitimate basis for it. Some people confusing a rape prosecution with a defamation action, not recognizing that rape deals with the conduct of a party. Defamation deal with statements, many of those statements which have nothing to do with Tawana Brawley. She could not in any way aid or assist in one way or the other. Now the final thing is, you got to remember, is that the person who had the burden of proof in this case is Stephen Pagonis. The judge instructed the jury as such, and on the case of defamation, because he is a public official, his burden of proof is the clear and convincing test. In other words, his evidence must be clear and convincing that either Maddox, Mason, and Sharpton made knowingly false statements, or that they made false statements that were in utter disregard for the truth itself. So the person who would have called Tawana Brawley would have been Stephen Pagonis. So, you know, people say, well, why wouldn't Tawana come and testify for Mason? Mason didn't have the burden of proof. Stephen Pagonis did. If Stephen Pagonis felt as though Tawana Brawley was critical to his case, he would have called her. But to turn this on its head and to say that Tawana Brawley is at fault is in total derogation of the rights and responsibilities of the parties in this defamation lawsuit.
So what do you say to people who have lost faith and who really just on the fact that Tawana did not appear? How do you renew their faith?
Well, you see, first of all, they shouldn't have lost any faith because they didn't know the case. And you see, and that's the real problem in the community, is people rush to judgment without the facts. You know, they read the New York Post, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, and they believe erroneously that they have enough information to make a judgment. And that's one of the real problems in our community. We don't. The real problem in our community is people want to lose faith in ourselves for failing to create a black media strong enough to put the facts out there on a daily basis so that people have the information that would lead them to recognize that Tawana Brawley was never given an opportunity to come here in the first place. The problem here is the fact that the white media created a fraud on the public by leading people to believe that Tawana Brawley had been contacted, that she had ample opportunity to come, that she was expected to come, and that she failed to come. Now, there's nothing I can do other than to urge people, urge churches, urge business people, urge community people to pool their resources together so that we can have the kind of media that will allow us to have the knowledge that is necessary for our survival. You know, one of the real myths in our community is that we believe that our real salvation, our real liberation will come by electing another Negro mayor, by electing somebody additional to Congress, or all of that. The most important tool for our survival is information. The absence of knowledge, it can be detrimental to your health. The only way that you can allow that information to come forward is to have a strong enough black media that puts that on the table. That is the direction that we should be going in. That is our first priority as a people. This is the information age. That's what computers are about. We are 100 years behind the times. Anytime that you have to rely on somebody else's information, you are an endangered species, so to speak. And as Stephen Biko himself, a South African warrior, stated, the most important, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And that's a reality. Once the oppressor gets our minds, there's no need for guns. There's no need for weapons. There's no need for barbed wire fences. There's no need for prisons, because they can manipulate you through the mental process. Our goal is to create that kind of black media, which was not here.